This is session 43. In the last class, we did understand about the merits and demerits of balance of power. We will continue to understand some of the basic concepts of international peace. Students will have practical knowledge of international relations and about the importance of international peace. Topic: balance of power is just equilibrium in power among the members of the family of nations, as will prevent any one of them from becoming sufficient strong to enforce it upon others. In this session, let us briefly understand about the meaning and importance of collective security. ಸಾಮೂಹಿಕ ಭದ್ರತೆ ಎಂದರೇನು ಅಂತ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡೋಣ. Collective security is a device of crisis management which postulates a commitment on the part of all nations to collectively meet in aggressions that may be committed by any state against other. War or aggression is viewed as breach of international peace and security, and collective security stands for collective actions by all nations in defense of peace. Collective security stands for meeting any war or aggressions by creation of global identity of power of all nations against the aggression. It is designed to protect international peace, security against war and aggressions in any part of the world. It is based on the principle aggressions against any one member of international community is an aggression against international peace and security. As such, it has to be met by the collective efforts of all the nations. According to George Schwarzenberger, collective security is a machinery for joint action in order to prevent or counter any attack against an established international order. Palmer and Perkins says collective security clearly implies collective measures for dealing with threats to peace. During the last decade of 20th century, the collective security began acting as a popular and useful device for the preservation of international peace and security. The Charter of United Nations regards the preservation of international peace and security as its most major objective. In this charter, international peace and security have been used 32 times. In the very first article, while stating the purpose of United Nations, it makes the preservation of international peace and security as its first priority. It lays down the collective security assistance for this purpose. Collective security system has been laid down in Chapter 7 of United Nations Charter, and its title reads, Action with respect to threats to peace, breaches of peace, and acts of aggression. It contains 13 articles from Article 19 to 51, which together provide for a collective system for preserving international peace and security. The United Nations Security Council has been assigned the responsibility and power to initiate collective security action for meeting any threat to international peace by war or aggression. Some of the basic assumptions include: in an armed conflict, member nations will be able to agree on which nations the aggressor is. All member nations are equally committed to contain and constrain the aggression, irrespective of its source of origin. All member nations have identical freedom of action and ability to join in proceedings against the aggressor. The cumulative power of cooperating member alliance for collective security will be adequate and sufficient to overpower the might of the aggressor. In light of the threat posed by collective might of nations of collective security coalition, the aggressor nations will modify its policies or is unwilling to do so will be defeated. Prerequisites. Hence, Morgenthau gives the following prerequisites to successfully prevent war. The collective security system must be able to assemble military force in strength greatly in excess to that assembled by aggressors, thereby deterring the aggressors from attempting to change the world order defended by collective security system. Those nations whose combined strength would be used for deterrence, as mentioned in the first prerequisite, should have identical belief about the security of the world order that has collective in defending. Nations must be willing to subordinate their conflicting interests to the common good, defined in terms of common defense of all member states. Nature of collective security includes collective security recognizes the relevance of power in international politics. It accepts the fact of war as reality. Collective security is a device of management of power, not that of elimination of power. Collective security is something less than world government, more than balance of power, or it can be considered to be an alternative of the world government because latter is not feasible. A proper functioning of collective security system possible only through international organization. It is different from balance of power and collective defense. What was the initial reason for establishing NATO? NATO was merely a military alliance, was an instrument in the hands of American government, was a mechanism to contain the spread of communism in Europe, was a mechanism to contain fascism in Europe. Answer C. The Brand Report argued that developing world should get its act together and fend for itself, recommended a massive aid program to assist developing countries, was inspired by Bob Geldof and Live Aid, insisted that aid should only be offered to non-communist countries. Answer B. Why does climate change have the potential to affect security questions? It threatens to increase existing tensions between developed and developing states. It could lead to mass movement of refugees from areas that no longer inhabitable. Shortages of vital resources like food and water may give rise to conflict, all the above. Answer B. Why did President George W. Bush hail a new world order after 1991 Gulf War? It meant that the US could now do whatever it wanted. There seems to be a much better chance of lasting peace because after the Cold War, the United Nations was no longer so sharply divided on ideological grounds. Saddam Hussein had been toppled at last. Bush has suddenly decided the realist theory was rubbish. Answer B.